In the early days of the internet, radical libertarians were scattered, lonely, and faceless. Without direction, they resigned to scour the web, sifting through content providers in a wasteland plagued by YouTube demonetization, Facebook jail, and covert internet censorship. But then, in 2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.
Hey everyone, it's Daniel Elwood and Robert Johnson, the Last Nighters, and the Last Nighters is on the Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. This is going to be episode 56 of the show, where we're going to be talking about the Michael Mann flick Tom Cruise, Jamie Foxx, Collateral, and we have a guest all the way from Canada named Mike C. But before we introduce him and ask a few preliminary questions about, introduce yourself to the audience and all that, let's say hello to Robert for a moment, and then we'll start talking about this movie. It'll be great fun.
Hello, my lovelies. Glad to be back on the show. Glad to talk to you about another fantastic flick. And glad to have a man from the Great White North here to tell us all about it. Mr. Mike C.
Hey, what's up?
Yeah, welcome, Mike C. So this was a suggestion from you from quite a while back, actually. And it was this one or Salt. And
I'm glad you went with this one.
Oh, good. Thank you. We've made a wise choice, wise decision. We've chosen wisely to borrow from The Last Crusade, right? So, Mike, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, maybe where they can find your music and anything else that you feel interesting for them, and then we'll get into the show here.
Oh, that's a bit of a... Okay. Yeah, I'm from Canada, in Alberta, which is sort of in a vassal state of the federal government, and the federal government's been a vassal of other countries since its inception, so... but it allows for a lot of sort of cowboy, mentality. It's fairly... there's a lot of libertarian sort of thinking here with some very weird religious, conservative, authoritarian shit. So that's my upbringing, and that's kind of where I'm coming from. I do some music sporadically that doesn't earn me any money, so it just kind of shows up when it does on SoundCloud. It's Mechanical Dream Revolution. Recommend checking out Old Stories, which is my last album. It's got some good, just some pretty fun stuff.
Right, very good.
And yeah.
We'll put a link to that on our show notes page. Does it have an embeddable player? We can put that on there as well.
I think so. I don't even know what that means. So.
All right. Well, I'll prepare to have your mind blown. When people go to lastnighters.com/56, they'll see the show notes for this episode.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I know what you mean now.
Where they can listen to your music right on that page.
Oh, that sounds great.
If I could figure it out. I'm a bit of a Luddite, technologically speaking. Yeah. But why don't we talk about this movie?
Okay.
Hey,
yeah.
All right, so we usually start with the Google description. So here we go. Collateral, 2004, Michael Mann movie. Drama, crime film, 2 hours in length, 7.5 on the IMDb, 3.5 out of 4 from Roger Ebert. 86% Rotten Tomatoes and 89% of the Google users like it. Here is the description. After a long day, LA taxi driver Max is about to knock off when a sharp-suited Vincent offers him $600 to make 5 stops. Sounds good until Vincent turns out to be a merciless hitman, and each one of those stops involves a hit. As the night goes on, Max starts to wonder if he'll live to see the sunrise, as the pair are hunted by the police and the FBI. Came out on August 6, 2004. Director Michael Mann had a budget of $65 million and made a pretty penny at the box office of $217.8 million US. Won a few awards, and all around an interesting film. Your thoughts, Robert, and then we'll ask Mike why you suggested this one.
This movie really, it hit me right from the get-go. I mean, you start off with this Jamie Foxx character. This movie's packed full of great actors, by the way, all putting in fantastic performances. I think Tom Cruise as the hitman is just the standout. He's like this kind of alpha, take no shit kind of guy, and he's also a psychopath. But he really has a strong character, and it's just what Jamie Foxx's character needs at this moment, and we'll get into all that. But yeah, really, really strong performances, excellent script. I love the concept. You have to take a little bit of the plot, you got to suspend disbelief for everything happening all in one night, and having the cops all like being able to solve this crime and whatnot and be like on the tail. In reality, I don't think the cops would have been Johnny on the spot and all figuring out all at once, but whatever. It's all good. Great film. I'm eager to get into it.
All right, Mike, your take, and then why this is one that you suggested.
Well, the Google description's good. It summarizes the story, but not the plot. So it doesn't touch the themes at all, which is, I guess, maybe good because you'd want to be able to not be spoiled or whatever for what the movie's trying to say. But it's certainly more than like a caper or cops and robbers kind of thing. There's a lot of deep themes about masculinity and self-actualization, which I find interesting. And then, I mean, it's almost more prevalent 15 years later, or more relevant 15 years later, looking at sort of, some ads on television, certain narratives that are pretty anti-masculinity. And then, that's kind of about it.
Yes.
That's kind of why I liked it.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I liked it as well. Robert liked it as well. I think we've already spoiled the fact that we're going to give this a good rating. But I guess my question is, what stands out? I mean, we're a bit of a libertarian show, so I imagine that there were some like libertarian arguments that really.
Yeah, there's some pepper in there. It's like pepper. What I liked about it too is why I might have suggested it was there's a bunch of little moments in there where you guys can really sink your teeth into some sort of regulatory thing that's just sort of mentioned offhand. And then I think we should out of the gate probably get the entire idea of contraband out of the way, and how legal systems and prohibition obviously inflates the value of contraband and gives psychopaths access to unreasonable amounts of power in a marketplace through black market. So I think the bad guys, or the Vincent is working for people that don't want a trial to go, and they're in the exotic substances business, so they're drug dealers, which means all of their power is derived from prohibition. But I don't know how, that would be beating a dead horse. I'm not sure if we're going to talk about that for an hour. So we kind of have to embrace the idea that it's cops and robbers and discuss sort of the more philosophical stuff, which is what I really enjoy. I'm more of an anarchist than a libertarian, I think, if that makes sense. It's a philosophical position rather than a practical one.
Okay, right. And you sort of have a practical hat as well that I'm sure will come to bear later on in this episode, I'm sure. But basically, the premise, we should talk about the premise just to lay it out there. I know that we assume that people have seen this movie, but essentially you've got this taxi driver who appears to have it all together. And I'm borrowing heavily from a video that you shared with me, and I'll post that on the show notes page as well. But who appears to have it all together, and then this sort of alter ego, or the shadow of Peter Pan, who actually completes him as a character, exposes him for all of the faults that he's trying to hide by lying about, or even lying to himself. He's one of these entrepreneurs, I want to say, the Jamie Foxx character.
I like it.
He's got these big dreams, but he's too afraid to make a move. And he also is seeking that perfection. He makes that comment multiple times about it's got to be perfect. Everything's got to be perfect. And so it's one of those situations where it's like the perfection is the enemy of the good, where he's never going to be satisfied enough to actually go through with anything. And it's finally in the, near the end of the movie when he's confronted with this, where he actually decides to shit instead of just getting off the pot. And, he crashes the taxi in his ultimate personal resolution to getting over his indecisiveness. Right, actually taking action and doing something. Yeah,
no, I like it. That's pretty accurate. I'd agree with that. I don't usually agree with people, so
it's a rare thing.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting to have his revelation come from a assassin, psychopathic murderer guy. I mean, usually, who was it that said you can take, positive things from very negative people? I forget who it is, but you can always learn more. Learn more, but you can always have something to learn from the worst situations or the worst people. And it's interesting that he gained this positive outcome from this very horrific person. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like a traumatic situation where, when you're comfortable, it's low level thinking can get you by. But when you're in a very high stress situation, you're firing different neurons. I mean, you're having to navigate and adapt and overcome, to borrow from the improvisation that they talk about with the jazz, and then also mixing in some of the Marine ethos, where he has to like figure out something because all of his traditional avenues are blocked. All of his normal, comfortable positions are no longer available to him, and so he has to go outside of his comfort zone to essentially save the day for himself.
Yeah, I mean, you could if you wanted kind of an economic version or wordplay, you could, I mean, it's really just competition that brought out the best in him ultimately, and he had to innovate to sort of succeed, right? Like his system was stagnant, and somebody came into his life, and he then had to evolve out of his behavior.
Yeah, that's true.
Through and there's really nice like sort of, I mean, there's almost a sibling rivalry between Vincent and Max when they go visit his mother, right? Because his mother, and you can look at the sort of, the toxic maternity, and where did he get these entrepreneur sort of habits of maybe a school system that muted him to his own potential and told him to sit and listen and not think of for himself, and then but I mean that's a social constructionist kind of problem to look at, but like you could look at Max and Vincent almost as like competing brothers, right? So
right, and even Jamie Foxx says early on that he hates competition, and
yeah.
I know it's goddamn right he does. He works for a taxi service.
Yeah,
and they have
I know. He started
license structure to eliminate competition, and I mean this is all pre-Uber. This is 2004. Uber is decimating the taxi industry, and they're clamoring for more protection for their monopoly racket.
It drives me nuts too, because like every once in a while in the media, I'll see some virtue signaling about surge pricing and how that's like some sort of ethical problem. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, well, no, the price goes up and then people get off their asses and start working. Like, what's the fuck? What's the problem there?
Right, and the flip side is these are the same people who are saying that these drivers are being exploited in their own vehicles.
Well, and they are by the state and by their bosses.
Right, but you and I know that. But I mean, the people complaining about Uber's surge pricing are also complaining about these drivers not making enough money.
Yeah, well, they just, I mean, I don't know. Like, I go to the gym and there's one row machine, and if somebody's on that one row machine, I invented a narrative why that guy's an asshole. Whether it's, if it's a fat white guy, I'm like, oh, that guy, fuck him. He's not coming to the gym for the right reasons, or he's not in shape enough. If he's skinny, I'm like, well, he doesn't even need to. I should be on there anyway, right? And if it's like, if it's some sort of other, like some visible minority or something, I'll like have these like immediate like racist sparks in my head that I have to stuff down, right? But and a lot of politics is just telling people a story that they want to hear to be right and to not have to work and to get free shit. And so, so the surge pricing issue, the taxi issue, right? Of course, taxi drivers who don't want to transition to something else, and they've already, I mean, it's also the sunk cost fallacy too, right? They've invested themselves and submitted to oppression, because they were told that they would be protected for that submission. And now somebody's coming along and doing stuff freely and liberal and, exercising their innovation or finding an innovation in that place and throwing them under the bus, So of course they're going to double down on what they've, invested in.
Right. And not only
getting out, you know what I mean?
Right, and it also intensifies over time, because when those taxi licenses first came out, they were like $5 or $20 or $30 or whatever.
And it just goes up and up.
Yeah, 1939 or whenever they went into effect in New York City. And then by the mid 80s, there were still the same number of medallions for a growing population and a growing demand. So the price for taxi cabs kept going up and the medallions kept going up. I think that the peak was something close to $1 million for one of those licenses that just 70 years earlier had been purchased for like $30.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just, I don't know. Like a lot of problems in this movie could have been solved if fucking Max had a gun. Do you know what I mean? If he just had a gun on him.
Well, he eventually does get one, and it does solve this problem, to your point.
Yeah, like he solves a lot of problems pretty quick as soon as he's armed, as well as the person that he's competing with that's trying to kill him. So, yeah, it's like, okay, I'm just going to drive around in my car, and then some people that ultimately can imprison me and like arrest me and take my shit are going to tell me that I have to abide by some system, right? And so it's like you're given this choice to like rebel against that or not. And every time you don't rebel, every time you submit to an oppressive system, you endure suffering, and then the ego creates a narrative that rationalizes that. And the further you get into that, the more all of the pain that you've endured is residing on your worldview and belief system. So it becomes harder and harder as you go. You really got to fuck somebody up sometimes to free their mind.
Like Vincent does to
Yeah,
Jamie
that's
Foxx.
exactly it, right? So
All right, so let's bring Robert in. Any comments so far? Or do you want to take us in another direction?
Well, I thought we'd start off at the beginning of the movie,
I like it.
where Jamie Foxx is driving his cab, and who is it? Jada Pinkett Smith gets in the cab, and she wants to go to a certain place, and he's like, "Sure, no problem." But then she has different ideas about how to get there, but Max is like, or Jamie Foxx's character is Jamie Foxx's character Max? No,
Yes.
who's
Yeah, Jamie.
Okay.
Jamie's Max. You can say Jamie Foxx though.
yeah, either way.
Vivica, Pinkett Smith is definitely the fox in the two situations. So
It's true.
Out of
So
the two.
anyway, so he has better ideas. Like he's the expert, but she has her ideas about how to. They get in an argument. But I like his solution that okay, we'll do it my way, but if you're not satisfied, I'll give you a free ride. I thought that was a really cool solution. And
well, it's interesting because like the only thing she's putting up is like liking him essentially. He's trying to. It's a very very romantic kind of scene, which I liked because they're she's not like some dainty princess or something. She's level-headed and a businesswoman. So it's interesting that that's how he courts her, is by like challenging her a little bit. And
Yes.
it's like I'll put this $100 up against basically your number.
Right. It's a
Your
subtle
respect.
power.
Yeah.
yeah, and if you've seen a Hollywood movie in the past like 5 years, you know that the lost art of romantic dialogue has completely been lost. So there is some subtle, romantic stuff going on between these two characters in this movie that is very well done. But if you watch some kind of thing, like I watched Aquaman recently, and it is just hilarious. They just don't know what they're doing anymore. I don't know if these are just terrible people, but
Yeah. No, if
subtlety is a lost art. That's all I have to say.
yeah, if God could just go ahead and smite Hollywood, that'd be sweet. And we'll start again. We could build it like in Milwaukee or something. Just
They did
Nuke it from outer space. It's the only way to be sure.
I said smite. That's not a direct call to violence. That's just an abstraction, right? It's a religious right that I have to say that.
Right, and insurance wouldn't cover it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, fuck them.
Now, I do want to ask you guys, his solution, this deal he makes with her, they're basically betting on a counterfactual. Like they can't know the alternative. So it's
No.
bizarre to me.
But he does make
that's how men and women interact with each other, though. There's no rules, and the language is never like grounded in anything because they have completely different languages that they're speaking to each other. That's just a pleasant formality on top of what they're actually trying to get done. I guess, I don't know. That's my explanation anyway.
Code. It's all code. Okay. I mean, basically, he's just being flirtatious, but in a subtle and assured way.
confidence.
Showing that confidence, which, so I've heard, is very attractive.
Yeah, well, he was so confident that he challenged her, put up everything, offered to have her put up no collateral, forgive that, against the bet. And then also, she was allowed to be the judge. On top of everything else, she determined. So if she was petty, she could be like, I want a free ride. That's how much he put himself out there. So a very submissive position, which, yeah, that actually kind of makes sense. So it's like...
With a fair amount of risk.
Yeah, I know, but so he's like, I'm confident.
Abilities.
But it is like a very disadvantageous position. So yeah, I think that's like what he was kind of offering. He's like, all right, so here's all of me. I have this, like, he gave her the picture too. He completely submitted everything to her because he was in love, I guess, at first sight. But like that's his approach to women, is just giving up everything, not holding anything back for himself, right? Which is, in my experience, not ideal unless you're part of some destiny.
Well, it is a Hollywood movie, so perhaps.
Yeah, so it worked out great that like he was ordained to be with her by like the fates, because most times I lay myself out like that. It does not work out for me. I'm just throwing that out. There.
Was anybody else turned off when
free ride and leave?
Was anybody else turned off when she said that she was a state prosecutor, though?
Yeah, but like I don't know, libertarian in the streets, statist in the sheets, something like that.
Kind of get the pass, basically.
People can be turned. Maybe he gets to be the statist, when she's not working and she's a little more liberal. I don't know, something like that.
So what would we describe the prosecutor? I mean, are they the tip of the spear, or are they like what actually pierces the armor? Because you've got the police or the frontline enforcers, but she's the one who's actually like looking for every possible thing in the book that you can throw at the person to make something stick, right? And as we all know, there's 100,000 regulations and laws and whatnot in the United States, and their job is to overcharge so that something sticks.
It's hard to get a metaphor out of that, like, cause it's like we're all these cogs and machines, and we fulfill, like, it's more like a D&D party composition where like she's the lawyer. like the healer or the whatever an anti-version of the healer is, the sapper. Because they do fulfill sort of other like multiple roles, I guess.
So you're talking about like a character archetype type like role?
Yeah, because she's not. It's definitely not the tip of the spear, but it is the last action of the state in prosecution. Is the prosecuting part. So like you apprehend, you arrest somebody. Sorry.
They're playing a role within that apparatus, but they're playing a role in front of their counterpart, who is.
Or you could also view it as the end, though. Is my point. Like it's the last thing that the state does.
Other than kill you.
Other than the executor and the
So like if you want to, she's like the hands on the spear, and then the police enforcement system, the actual police force is the shaft, and then like the tip would be the lawmakers, I guess, because like that's what initiates this, right? Is democracy, voting, getting people into positions where they're allowed to do certain things, and then the Supreme Court justices just kind of slowly chip away at your Bill of Rights.
Right, and then these prohibitions, and hence the drug war, and the whole impetus for the plot in this, where there's the Colombian cartel who are under threat by this government prosecution, and there's witnesses, and so they're a threat to them, and they take action by hiring Vincent.
But again, like I think like as libertarians, you're going to be beating a dead. We could talk about that particular problem for an hour, easy, because like we all know that drugs being illegal creates violence and disproportionate representation in the marketplace, or whatever, like and generally like psychopaths gravitate or move to the top of hierarchy chains, right, or hierarchies in any system. So a more violent system is going to have the worst psychopaths at the top of it. Sucks, but sorry,
like a political system.
Exactly, except like the politics of drug production and distribution is more violent, so it's more of a feudal kind of situation, right? So it's much more like a less refined, less nuanced, it's more violence driven, with probably clearer borders on their territory and stuff like that, from what I understand. But this is what I like about Michael Mann. These aren't judgmental films. Like there's no, like, he just leaves that out of it. He says the world has cops and robbers, and here's some drama and some interesting ideas about how they interact with each other sometime. He doesn't say the cops are good or the drug dealers are good. Like that's kind of not really part of it. It's really about Vincent and Max, right?
Yeah, I did notice a bit of a almost documentary feel.
Yeah. Well, you saw Heat, right?
Yeah. This felt a lot like Heat as well. Yeah. But a lot of like the shots were handheld and abstract and really tight, like very closely cropped in.
Yeah. No, he's brilliant. I mean, I think he's maybe over the hill, but we'll see. He's doing a movie about Ferrari, so that'll be a good one. In terms of like, entrepreneurs and awesome fast cars, that might be fun.
Yeah. So
except you guys hate roads.
No, I said I love roads.
Roads.
It'd be private roads.
God damn you, roads! Government keeps building roads. You have to stop them.
Well, let's talk again about the entrepreneur and the wantrepreneur, because Jamie Foxx is the wantrepreneur and Vincent is the entrepreneur. He is out there providing a service, being paid very well. He's at the top of his game. He's very effective at what he's doing. And he's also very steadfast in his, I have a job to do and you're fucking with my job here.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to accomplish this. I have a contract with my employers who have hired me out. And it's, he's an action taker. I mean, yes, he's a sociopath slash psychopath slash murderer.
Trained by the state.
Yeah. And did they ever clarify like what was his origin? Because he said he did 6 years private sector.
Yeah, they thought that he might have been like, I think they made him KGB or something.
Oh, Russian, eh?
Yeah. Well, we gotta hit them Russians.
Yeah,
they rig our elections and make movies fail. I think they were responsible for Ghostbusters not doing well. So yeah. Anyway, so and that's the thing. Like, so I have this romantic idea about dueling with swords, right? But it's like, you realize that the peasant didn't have the kind of training a soldier for the state had, right? And it takes time to learn how to, you see some of the gunfights that Vincent gets into. It's incredibly well trained. And he wears a gray suit. He has no sort of signifiers that make him stand out in any way. He's very good at what he does. And so at once his job is necessitated by, sort of statism, oppression, right? And then on top of that, he was also trained by that same system, but from a different place. Or maybe it was CIA or something, who knows?
And he wears his sunglasses at night.
Yeah, no, I
mean, that kind of stood out to me. I think we were talking about that on a recent show. And in a way, this sort of feels like a counterpart to the recent Tom Cruise movie, American Made, because in that one, he's also working with the Colombian cartels, but in a different capacity.
Is he, what is that? Is he running guns to them, or
guns and drugs?
Oh, is that that Reagan shit?
Yeah, in the 80s, Bill Clinton, Mena, Arkansas.
Card-carrying Democrat until he was a Republican. Naturalized a bunch of illegal immigrants because they'd vote for Democrats, and then gave guns to Colombian and Mexican drug lords.
Nicaraguan, I think, right? The Sandinista.
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is that like that just doesn't seem like good leadership to me. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like, if we're going
saying
to
something negative about our politicians, Mike?
oh, Reagan, I'm not a super fan of. I know he broke up unions, but that's all bullshit, right? It's not real.
How dare you?
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the entrepreneur who's been driving a cab for 12 years, and he finally fesses up to this to Vincent. And it made me think of, he's calling it something temporary. And there's the quip of there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. And that's what it felt like to me when he was talking about.
That's income tax, right?
Or any
temporary war measure in Canada.
Oh, really? Okay.
Income tax was a temporary war measure in Canada, but it's like you taxes come in, they don't ever go away. You don't cut taxes.
Right, and even when they want to introduce a new one and they promise to eliminate a prior one, they never do.
Yeah, no, they don't. Right? It's like I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Reagan might have cut. I think that if you looked into it, you get like the same thing probably with Trump, where like they'll make a cut, but they'll just move to something else. Like it's just something you can't see unless you look hard enough and figure out how the system works entirely. And Canada's tax system is sort of designed for laundering money from foreign nations. It's kind of complicated. You need like A+ accounting education to be able to understand it fully. So I'm not sure how a C student is supposed to navigate it. But anyway, taxes come in, they don't ever get cut.
Yeah, that is an interesting point, and one that is going to become relevant here in a couple of months when April 15th rolls around in the United States, because, yeah, it is so complicated how to file the taxes that it's almost you have to job it out to someone who's especially trained in it.
Yeah.
And if Bubis Americanus is relatively, averagely not that smart, yet they have this very complicated tax code with the threat of violence if you do it wrong. It seems like a very precarious situation to me.
Yep. That was when, like, I think one of the talking points was they wanted to make it simple, right? I'm not sure if that's happening or not, but I think that was one of the platforms among many promises.
Yeah, now
years.
A one-page form you fill out, but there's still like 100 attachments.
I liked who was the neurosurgeon that looked like he was asleep? Ben?
Give me some context here, sir.
He was running against Trump in the
Carson.
Ben Carson, that's it. Okay, so he wanted a flat tax, which to me, I know we don't want any taxes, but that seems like a marginal improvement.
Yeah, I'm going to argue the other way. I think that the more loopholes you have that can be taken advantage of by entrepreneurs, I think that the more breathing room that you have.
Yeah, but it's like it stratifies pretty quickly, right? It calls itself progressive as well, and it never is. It's always like regressive. It always like favors people in positions of wealth to begin with, and there's not a lot of competition in those, right? It's like favors monopoly, and the way like, if you have a copyright, and Disney's not going to lose the court case, you know what I mean? Because they can afford to engage. And like Starbucks is always going to be able to deal with rising minimum wage and regulatory laws because they're a huge company and they can navigate that, right? So the more expensive your accountant, the better you're going to be at navigating a complex system.
Yeah, I remember back like 10, 15 years ago when the left was actually outraged by legitimate things. They were upset when Monsanto would basically sue farmers for letting seeds that Monsanto had patented
that blew into some guy's field.
Into their field, and then they would just lawyer them down so that
that's lawyering at its best. That is the cream of the crop lawyering. Yeah, I know. It's like, and then they don't see the actual sort of underlying problem of maybe the intellectual property rights have something to do with the issue, not necessarily Monsanto's evil. I mean, they're a bad company, and they just got bought out by Bayer, right? So the guys that made Agent Orange just got bought out by the guys that perfected chlorine and mustard gas. So that's awesome.
That's a healthy combination and a tasty way to do it.
Yeah. So I mean, those guys can go F themselves.
Yeah, but they're just playing by the rules that...
No, yeah, they're just gaming the system like anybody else. That's what I mean, though, is that, like, so to your point, I'd prefer something flat because then at least it's fair. Then the maximum sort of freedom is allowed once the structure is built, right? It's like, okay.
Well, careful what you mean when you say fair.
Well, fair in terms of, like, everybody's got, whatever, the 70% of their wages or their income remaining they can use.
Well, okay. So let's just play with this just a little bit. So let's say that
do we want to talk about this movie or
everybody's taxed at 30%. Okay. So that's supposedly to pay for like the goods and services they use, right? That's the excuse that's given.
And the army that protects them.
Right. So why would it cost a rich man 10,000 times the price that it costs a poor person to do the exact same thing?
What do you mean? Oh, they have to pay more, you mean?
Yeah, they have to pay way more.
Well,
for the
yeah,
same
but
goods and services.
okay, yeah, okay, I'm on board with the idea of paying for the shit you use, but nobody wants to do that, and they have all the guns, so...
No, I'm just saying, though, when you say it's fair, like a flat tax is fair...
It's not. Yeah, okay, I see what you mean.
I don't want to be the language police here, but it seemed like you were saying that.
No, okay, it's got a more balanced mechanics for the game that we're playing.
Maybe it means in a relative sense, because right now the progression is the higher the income, that strata is a higher rate that it is taxed at.
Yeah, and also, though, like, there's more wiggling room. So, yeah, they can get out of more, but that really disenfranchises the people lower on that hierarchy because they already don't have very much money to work with, and then, like, that's less freedom. And so the more complicated the system, I don't know. I'm not sure how. I mean, like, it's not fair any way you look at it. I just think that a balanced system where everybody's forced to pay the same amount as a percentage. You know what? Like, the best system would be some sort of, like, flat rate for existence, and then just figure out what your baseline for social infrastructure is based on how much you have to pay in. But there's no way the poor could possibly do that based on a mean amount, right? So you have to...
Which would be great. Then we would find out real quick that this is all bullshit because you're killing poor people.
Yeah,
you're stealing all their money.
Yeah, I'm just saying, it's difficult. I found it difficult to convince people of what you're saying. So I'm trying to figure out a way to get us closer to a system that's fair so that at least people can compete as freely as possible within a system. That makes sense. So, like, yeah. So if we're going to have taxes, then people with more wealth should pay more if we're going to have taxes. I don't think we should have taxes. Is that satisfactory, or do you need to, like...
I completely disagree with you.
But, I know you do.
I've heard the argument before, and I'm not going to... We're a movie show. We should probably talk about a movie. It's fine.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about something that is a little bit less controversial here between the parties involved, and that is when Tom Cruise explains to Max, Jamie Foxx, that no, I didn't kill that guy. I shot him.
I love that guy's attitude.
The bullets in the fall killed him, so it's the proximate and the ultimate cause is getting a little bit mixed up here.
Yeah, I don't know if that's his psychopathic ex post fact. It seems weird. It seems more like a funny throwaway line because he doesn't have a problem with admitting to his murderous psychopathic abilities.
No, I think it just speaks to his nihilism and just, it sort of explains his worldview. And then it also offers Max, like, kind of a way to dismiss what's happening. It dominates Max through language, essentially.
Yeah, and he's also being very precise, right? Like, sure, I shot him, but that isn't what killed him ultimately.
Yeah, he reduces the human life that he just ended to a mechanism of physics, essentially.
Right.
So there's no ethics. Ethics are completely dismissed. So Max is like, he has a moral objection or an ethical objection to what's going on, and Vincent goes, "Fuck your morals."
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, the ensuing conversation where he's like, Max, you're all been out of shape about this one guy you didn't even know. Did you know, the Rwandan genocide, 1,000 people a day are dying or whatever it was. Yeah. And Jamie Foxx's reply is, well, I don't know any Rwandans.
You didn't know that asshole? It just fell off that's exactly it. So
right, but Jamie Foxx's argument is still valid. I mean, his argument is neither one of them is moral. But I can get upset about this one thing that just happened. It's right in front of me.
I think his point is that you're only upset because it's happening to you directly and it's affecting you, and that's why you're upset. So he's not allowing Max to become righteous about the situation. He's telling Max that he has a gun and Max is going to do what he wants, and his emotions are of no consequence, and his thoughts are of no consequence because he's no longer in a position of control. I think it's a way of, like, dominating him through the language he uses, because he just eliminates like the protest, essentially.
Yeah, he diffuses it. And he does a similar thing even before, like when he first enters the cab and he's talking to Max, and he's like, he sort of forces the deal on him. And
sure you can. Of course you can. Here's the money. Right? Yeah.
They give him time to consider it, or
that's just a hard sell, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's almost a Me Too moment,
Yeah, it is. Well, I mean, that can't happen to a man, but yeah.
Well, of course not, but that would be wrong. But yeah, it's like Jamie Foxx was essentially communicating no, but Tom Cruise is...
Well, his lips said no, but his eyes said yes. So.
Well, he did want that money, and it was interesting.
Plus, he was wearing that outfit that looked like it wanted money. So.
But he also said, "I can't take that money because it's against regs. It's against regulations."
I know. Yeah, I knew you guys would jump right on that one.
to hire a car for the night is apparently, for some reason, illegal.
That seemed to be a plot contrivance, because how could that possibly be true?
Oh,
Why
are you
would any
kidding? No,
business-
there's absolutely laws against that because it's, again, giving the cabby who has to submit to that system way too much power. You need to be able to regulate that if you want to keep control of them over time, because then they'll use their submission to get the license to gain wealth that will free them from the system you're using to oppress them.
So what would that regulation possibly say, though? I mean, what is he doing other than taking the same guy from location to location?
It's the same. So what it does is it'll pretend to be in favor of the consumer by saying that prices must be regulated to make it fair for everyone. So they'll be like, okay, it must be in this state or in this city or whatever. Usually it's like it's per minute or it's per mileage, right?
And there's a drop charge.
Yeah, and there's a flag fall. And so that's it. And so if you disobey those things, you're no longer behaving, right? So that surge pricing can occur. And cab companies have to pay their employees a certain amount or whatever. It's all just regulated because I guess the argument is that that makes things better for the consumer and the employees, having no control or freedom to negotiate.
There are all these notices in the cab. You see it in the movie and you see it in real life when you go in a cab, like all participants or all riders ride at the same single fare, and here's how much it is for the drop, and here's how much it is per mile, and here's the wait time. And if you have any complaints, report them to the taxi commission standards board or whatever. And it's all this illusion of there's this structure there protecting me as a consumer, when really it's a way of holding you back and making you pay more.
Well, that's like the striking edge of oppression is always virtue and safety and like social sort of cohesion and stuff like that, right?
Right, and I don't think this is like a nefarious plot. I think that these really are do-gooders who think that they're doing something positive, and it just always has a...
Yeah, it's more like a virus in our operating system called communism or Marxism. It's more like the truth of it, like I said, right? So if I go to the gym and I invent a narrative to be like, this guy on the row machine is an asshole, to make myself feel better about not getting up earlier, or being first to the position, or having the money or incentive to go to a better gym with 2 row machines, right? Like there's all these factors. I invent a narrative that says that this guy is my enemy.
But just don't go in January.
Way fucking easier than taking responsibility for my life, right? And so I think that kind of egoic stuff is easy to capitalize on if you have a little bit of capital and have kind of a good understanding of language, high language intelligence. You can sort of through when it's kind of like a rich person socialism, can kind of manipulate the people below you that don't really know any better.
Yeah,
you sell them. Yeah, I mean, you sell them
a do-gooderism.
Yeah, and I mean, like Hollywood's on board with that, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
I mean, like $4 billion to buy Star Wars from Lucasfilm, or to buy Lucasfilm, and they made a movie that was like they went to the Planet 1% and shit on capitalism, I guess. I'm not really sure but it seemed like a criticism of people like gambling and being rich from a company that owns everything. and the movie literally had a toy commercial at the end, right? Like, so I don't know, to be able to do that in plain sight to the person that you're selling the shit to is just, I gotta at least respect, what they've done. But I feel like we sort of we gravitate into like these masses, and then some guy shows up, right? I remember like Waco, Waco, Texas.
Of course. It happened. Yeah, it was a big kind of a big deal.
So they were doing pretty good. And before like the state murdered a bunch of people, they were doing pretty good, just being sort of like these sort of hippie anarchists. And then like one guy came in, was like, hey, let's ramp this up a little bit. And I'm not saying that that's a legitimate reason, but that's sort of, I think, what sparked the interest of the states. It's because they were positioning themselves to be more free than the state wants them to be, right? But there was I think that they were primed for a cult leader to come in and sort of take that the same way. Like, I mean, they got rid of like Christianity in the States or in Western culture, and then like Charlie Manson started showing up everywhere, right? So a guy could just kind of rock up and call himself Jesus, and then if you find a group of people that are ready to kneel, you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Am I just talking in circles? Can you print this?
I'm not sure how we got here.
Oh, yeah.
We did
We gravitate to submissive unions like naturally because it's just easy to blame something external, and then some asshole comes along with good language skills and a higher level of intelligence and like tells a story, and everybody just kind of goes, okay, yeah, all right, I'll just keep giving you money, right? That was kind of my point.
So you're equating David Koresh with Kathleen Kennedy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or like most of the people that are involved in both media and business or government, right? Like,
could we apply this theory to Vincent and Max, where Vincent is the one
yeah, I know we're supposed to talk about this movie.
forcing this upon Max? Because I felt like he was also
Yeah.
to befriend him in almost an intentional Stockholm syndrome initiation.
Yeah, okay. So this is actually great because Max is the submissive individual, and then he's let himself be trampled on left and right, by the state and his boss, and probably like you look at the way he behaved with a girl that smiled at him, gives him the picture that was very dear to him, leave nothing for himself, right? So he seems like he just kind of puts himself out there, and so it'd be very easy for him to be manipulated and misled if he got into a group, right? Which is the union of the taxis, right? Like, so he's part of that group, and he's probably part of some other group, and it'd be easy for people to sort of abuse him through that system. But because he's isolated by a psychopath, he's given a chance to like sort of rebel.
Right? Yeah, we see the dispatcher abusing him and threatening him.
Yeah, but like my point is that like if he was abused by a psychopath within a group, I don't think he would have had the same opportunity for enlightenment or sort of like a consciousness shift or transcendence, I guess is the word I'm looking for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, to your point, we already see that. Like, he's already abused within a group, and he's still keeping his head down. And he's like, well, it's only temporary. It's only temporary. He's deluding himself. And he's fantasizing and checking out every now and again, thinking that he's going to emerge from this a better man. And maybe over time he would, but Vincent calls him out on it and says, no, you're just going to wake up being old and not having achieved the dreams that you hold on to because they're a fantasy for you because you're not a guy who's an action taker. No,
and it's a godsend to Max to have Vincent challenge him so directly and in such an isolated way. Like, he has no... Okay, and the cops, Ruffalo figures out, he's a great detective, and he figures out what's going on, and he's about to rescue him, and Max is like, thank God somebody's going to rescue me, and he just gets fucking shot in the head. Like, just like that. And it's a brutal scene, right? Because, it comes out of nowhere, and he's like, what do I do now? He's like, get in the car and keep submitting to the things I tell you to do, right? And it's at that point, that's the scene just before he rebels.
Right, yeah, he decides that, no one's going to save me, I'm going to have to do it myself.
Yeah. Because the first time he rebels, he grabs the suitcase when he's in the hospital and he runs. But he has no plan, and it's like a false enlightenment, right? Like, he just kind of like lashes out, He like dates the wrong person to get your dad angry, kind of rebellion, right? Like, it's
but he is trying to prevent the murders happening.
Yeah, but it's more like getting a tattoo out of anger than it is like a conscious kind of plan, right? Whereas like
it was an impulse thing.
Like, it's not. There's no and then he immediately. He doesn't keep going, right? Like, he doesn't stand his ground in the end either. So that is, but then when he's given what he thinks is salvation, and then that salvation is taken away from him, and then on top of that, Tom Cruise, Vincent gives him a speech, his nihilistic speech, and calls him out on all his bullshit, and is like how his own narrative is sort of holding him back. Then he says, "Fine, you're right. I'm gonna rebel against this," and that doesn't happen in group settings. Like, you don't go to church and figure out a way to rebel against everybody standing up and kneeling in sequence, right?
Yeah, but I don't think he's convinced by the argument. He's confronted and overcomes it. I don't think he accepts the nihilism. He accepts.
No, that's what I mean.
Action.
That's what I mean. He goes, okay, this guy's challenging everything I believe, and if I want to have meaning, I'm going to have to decide what I believe and inject meaning into my life, which is, I kind of got choked up the first time I watched him do that, right? Like, it was almost unexpected, even though it's everything in the movie makes sense, like leading up to that. Like, narratively, that's exactly what should have happened, but it still came as a surprise because they set him up as such a weakling. So.
Right. It's a great character arc.
Yeah. Well, it's got a better sort of feel than maybe Rocky or anything I see now in terms of like what a hero is. And like I said, I think he needed to be isolated, which is an interesting aspect of the plot, right? Like, he had to be like confronted directly by Vincent for a prolonged period.
Right. And he was even seeking salvation from strangers, right? Like, he was always looking outward for the solution previously. And he even got robbed by the first group of party that was he was trying to seek help from.
Yeah. He kept reaching out to, like I said, so the first thing I see, like he just, lays down and submits to the first woman that smiles at him. And then I don't know. Yeah, like, and then every stage of the way, he's asking for help. And then those guys, they're just a couple assholes on the street going to rob him because he's tied up. Like, his hands are tied. Yeah. No, that's it all the more I think about this movie, the better it is, right? So I'm glad I picked it.
And
But yeah, I don't know if this movie could be made today. I mean, Max can basically be replaced by
Well, like
a
Leslie
GPS
Jones
system.
maybe, or Melissa McCarthy.
No,
She's pretty funny.
no, no, please no. But it's interesting that that I don't know how realistic this situation is, just because I know they kind of play in this world where Vincent like takes over cab drivers and that sort of thing. But it seems to me like an unnecessary risk that Vincent would take to introduce this other person to drive him around during his hit spree.
Why not just rent a car, basically?
Yeah,
Well,
just rent a car, drive yourself.
Well, there's a paper trail for that. He pays in cash. Cabs don't have a record of who's in them. At least in 2004, there's no cameras. And then I think that it's not like like in the first case, right? There's the old case a few years back or whatever where a cabbie killed a bunch of people and then offed himself.
Right? Right.
So
Yeah.
he obviously wasn't like declaring himself to be a mass murderer to the cabbie. He was just getting rides around with the same cash purchase, and then he killed the cabbie to cover his tracks. So
Right.
it's not. I mean, yeah, it might not be the best idea, but I can think of worse ideas, I guess. I'll suspend my disbelief on that one.
You're right. Yeah, I mean, it didn't ruin in a movie for me. It just seems like an unnecessary risk that Vincent would take, because you're introducing the possibility of a witness, of the guy getting away at any given point, of him even finding out and then shooting you. I don't know. It's just seems like an unnecessary risk. But for the movie's sake, of course.
Now,
I don't mind at all.
Because they bring up that Oakland thing, that was Vincent, right? The few years prior.
We assume so.
And so therefore we're to assume from hearing that story that Max's character was intended to be killed by the end.
Right.
Yeah, that was going to be the plan. So yeah, so that's what's at stake, and that's what Max needed in order to transcend, is to face his own death, right? And so the fates were like, well, let's put these two guys together. That should get one of them on their way, because it's like, I think that ultimately what's his name? Vincent would have evolved in some way if Max hadn't, because like one of them had to die, and he was challenging Vincent on his worldview at the end there as well, in a very real way. So it's interesting that like it's almost as though the reason Max prevailed over Vincent was that Vincent was static and Max transcended or innovated, if you want an economic or marketplace term. So he was willing to evolve, and Vincent was sort of toxically confident in the system, in his worldview and in his behavior, right? And then
talking about the final culmination, the final shootout, where
also he didn't expect Max to toss the car. It started some events that Vincent couldn't control, and he couldn't improvise and jazz his way out of. And then he started fighting him, and then he kept underestimating Max over and over. Like, oh, what are you going to do about it? Shoots him right in the face, Great. That's exactly what you do when somebody with a gun says, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, you pull the trigger right on him.
Yeah, you don't. And I'm like, wow, what a great movie. Guy actually pulled the trigger, didn't fucking, the yappity yap for 15 minutes.
Yeah, so Tom Cruise, Vincent didn't realize that Max had snapped at that point, that he had gone beyond that breaking point where he was no longer that idle non-action taker.
Yeah, well, his sociopathy was limited his perception of other people. Like, he couldn't even perceive Max changing.
Right, and actually Max says that to him, like, you have no idea what other people are thinking. He says that to him, so that's like foreshadowing this very event. And also it's a character trait of Max to be able to read people. They demonstrate it multiple times. He does it to the prosecutor. He does it to Felix, the drug lord guy. He does it to Vincent, where he can read the person based on how they carry themselves, what they're wearing, what accessories they have, all of those things. He's very perceptive about the people that he's interacting with.
Right, okay. And there's a introductory conversation where he talks about that to the girl in the very beginning of the movie, where he talks about his ability to examine, read a person as soon as they see them.
Yeah, I like that. So they're kind of two extremes, right? You got like a soy boy and a Nazi, and they sort of meet in the middle, and they decide that like being sensitive and perceptive and able to evolve based on the input, but also self-actualizing and Chad, to actually go and get shit done, right?
So how does this manifest in the final shootout? Because Max is going train car to the very front. He can't go any further. Yeah. And then there's
again, how like brilliant is that visual, right? Where he's completely cornered. Like everything in the movie puts him into a situation where he cannot run anymore. Sorry, you were saying?
Well, I guess I'm trying to have clarity for myself because the action goes really quickly.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if there's more to it. Like it's being that all of these elements we're talking about right now demonstrated in the action sequence where, he's cornered and he shoots almost at random through the doorway.
Yeah.
And he hits Vincent one time in the gut or the kidney or whatever.
Yeah.
But Vincent's MO, the entire film, is very tactically and precise. A couple of shots to the body, center of mass, and then a tap in the head.
Yeah, but he's unable to adapt despite his virtue signaling about how adaptive he is.
Right, but he's like shooting the same way, and it was a tell, actually. That's how they linked a lot of the murders together. It's like, oh, this person was murdered the same exact way, the same shot pattern.
Yeah, two tight to the chest and one in the head.
Right, and so I guess, in that 5 seconds of action, is Vincent shooting into the metal of the door in that tight group.
I also, Max sidesteps as soon as the lights go out as well, I noticed on this viewing. So
he's shooting rather randomly, but through the glass.
Oh, I see what you mean. So it's a more loose and improvised.
Right, like
shoot.
If Vincent had Max in his sights, he would have hit him with multiple bullets. But Max on the other side was like improvising.
Yeah. Well, and it's also fortune favors the bold, right? So the lights going out is divine intervention, evening the playing field. Because God would want the righteous men to evolve and succeed, and not to be like fucked over by like a random bullet firing in the dark. You know what I mean? Like, so that's just storytelling, though, right? That's where God exists for me, is in narrative, not in. But I'm not on the Bill Maher side of like yelling at people on the street like an asshole about what they believe.
Since when is any of this negotiable, Mike?
Anyway, so the lights go off, and one man is unable to evolve, and the other guy just tries his best and prevails, which, that's pretty. That'll get me choked up when I think about it. If I think about it too long, I like it.
All right. Well, very good. Well, we are about at our time for the Last Nighters here at episode 56 on Collateral. So any final points before we get into the summary and review? Let's go to Robert.
I don't think so. I liked all the cameos in this film. I mean, just for funsies. People want to be in these Michael Mann movies. Jason Statham is at the very beginning.
Airport guy,
and then Javier Bardem, who went on to do, No Country for Old Men and many other great films, is the drug dealer guy. There's just
God, I think. No,
a lot of fun talent in this film.
Oh, I do have one question that I thought might be a bit of a miss in the editing or like the realism. And maybe I'm wrong on this, but isn't a taxi, when they are not available, don't they turn off their taxi light?
Yeah, I thought so.
But it's on the whole time.
I had a guy with a light on drive past me.
There's also one scene
I don't know
in
a
the
gun,
club
so
that bothered me.
it worked out. What?
There's one scene in the club that bothered me when he's going to execute the guy in the club, and everybody's in the club, and the cops are in the club, and everybody starts shooting, and it goes on for a really long time. There's all these shots getting fired, dozens of shots being fired, and there's still scenes of people dancing.
Yeah, I guess
that bugged me.
I mean, gunshots would clear out a club, I think, despite it being loud.
Yeah,
I don't want to make jokes or references to shit that's happened because it's gotten way too real recently. But yeah, okay,
I think when some people getting shot, and there were scenes of people running, but then I don't know if it's a bad editing job or whatever, but then there's some shots of some people still dancing and
I don't know. Yeah, I would chalk it up to them just being like, well, maybe. I mean, like bullets in movies make a lot less noise than reality. Like,
true.
They fire weapons in enclosed areas and don't go deaf.
Right.
And silencers are called silencers instead of suppressors, and they muffle sounds to a whisper, or muscle shots to whispers. So I guess that's in the vein. Because you're right. Like, I think they'd be clearing out pretty quick. So it could have been editing, or it might have just been the way Hollywood perceives gunfights in clubs.
Yeah, and they've written it a certain way so that we've got this much action that needs to take place, and we need to have all these people in the way to be able to push out of the way. And
because otherwise he would have been gunned down. He needed all of the collateral damage.
Yeah, you need to have people to hide behind and whatever. Anyway, it's all good. It's all good. It doesn't ruin my experience.
Now, is that the impetus for the title of the movie? Is it the collateral damage of the innocent bystanders being killed as a result of these actions?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm kind of drawn to the idea of alone and what you put up against things, and the idea of like injecting meaning into your life by what you're willing to put up against your values. And so like if you're willing to, ultimately your life is at stake because you only have one, kind of thing. That's sort of what I got. Because like at the beginning he makes the bet with the lawyer, and he puts up everything against nothing for a chance at mating, essentially, right? To hook up with somebody. And then like later on, Tom Cruise comes out, or Vincent comes at him with like, his harsh nihilism and his psychopathic, view of humanity. And Vincent's like, okay, well, if that's the case, then fuck it, I'll just figure out my own thing, right? But you can't lord over me violence if you're also saying that my life doesn't matter. So I have to fight you. And so he, injects meaning into his life that way.
See, that's such like a long explanation for what must be one of the most like most movies are titled, and you understand why.
Yeah. You're like, oh yeah, Civil War. All right, the Marvel characters are fighting each other.
Yeah, this one you have to dig a little, and it's a bit ambiguous, I think.
Oh yeah, like who was the last Jedi though? Oh yeah, Luke. Okay. Sorry, I'm still really upset.
Somebody's still unhappy with Disney.
Anyway, yeah, I stand behind that. I mean, I'd have to talk to Michael Mann, but he won't. I've sent him, I think, 50 emails now, and he hasn't got back to me yet. So
he's not taking that call.
He's busy.
No. Well, let's do the final summary review, and I will defer to Robert, then we'll go to Mike, and then I'll close it out.
All right, so Collateral. I hope everybody's enjoyed our discussion. I appreciate Mike C. for carrying the heavy load tonight. I know you got all kinds of thoughts. You've seen this movie many, many times, put a lot of thought into the movie, and I appreciate that. Obviously, positive review from me. This is a great example of exposing character through showing what they're not, or showing their opposite or their mirror character. So Max and Vincent are very much like an odd couple, and that allows like a screenwriter to really, expose a character for their negatives or their lack of, their faults and that sort of thing, and what they aren't. So Max is, he's very thoughtful and he's empathetic, and he's also a man of, he's overthinking things. He's trying to make everything perfect before he actually takes action. And Vincent's an improviser, and he's a man of action, and he's also a psychopath. And just putting those two characters together, and you're going to get some excellent dialogue. And then you put them in this pressure cooker of a situation, and you get this really tight script, and it just turns into a fantastic film. And it kind of makes me pine for the old days of Hollywood. And it's funny to think about 2004, 2005, 2006 as the old days of Hollywood. But maybe I'm not watching the right movies, but you just don't see a movie like this anymore. And it makes me a little bit sad, but I'm glad it exists. I'm glad it's still there. And now you can still watch it, and everybody should go out and watch it if you haven't seen it yet. And I don't know why you're listening to this if you haven't seen it, but do what you got to do. Anyway, positive review for me. I'm going to give this like an 8.5. Really, really enjoyed it. It's just fantastic filmmaking. And you can see why, this script was probably thrown around Hollywood, and it attracted a whole lot of talented people's eyeballs. And they were like, I need to be a part of this, project, even if it's just a tiny little bit part or a little cameo. I just want to be in this film. And it features some of Tom Cruise's best acting of all time. He's actually a good actor. I mean, he's in some schlocky movies, some crappy movies, but he's a great actor when he gets the right role to be, Mr. pumped up A-type personality Tom Cruise. And it's a lot of fun to see him do that. So yeah, highly recommended for me. 8.5, all you can eat, baby.
All right, Mike, lay it down for us. Lay down that track.
Quite the endorsement. I love Michael Mann. I think that's why Tom Cruise does what he does in this film. Everything he does, even his films that aren't that great are pretty damn good. He uses live ammunition for training all of his actors, so they go on a shooting range with live ammunition and do live training drills, so they have a real understanding of the firearms they're using. I think that's kind of milks the juice out of the actors a little bit. And he's not very judgmental about the morality or ethical external pressures so much as just going, okay, there's cops and there's robbers and what happens between them. So that's really interesting. I recommend this movie because I love it very much. So I don't know, 9, I guess. I have a different rating system.
Well,
it's out of 5.
There's an exchange rate here.
Yeah. Oh fuck! Don't get me started, man. I don't know what, like 9. I don't want to give it a 10. No, you know what? It's 10 out of 10. If you don't watch it, you're an asshole.
All right, that is quite the endorsement. So 9, well, a 10, and you're an asshole if you don't watch it. All right, very good. Well, thank you very much. I also agree this is a good film. I did find some of it a little bit hokey, a little bit schlocky in a way. And I know, Robert, I'm just borrowing that term from you. But I found the camera work to be a bit forced. Like it almost was like trying too hard to make me unsettled. And I didn't understand a couple of the plot elements, like when he's in the building and he's trying to kill the prosecutor, why he bothers to cut the power. It seems to make it harder for him to do his job when it's just this one woman in there late at night. And I realized that for the plot purposes, you needed to buy some time for Max to make it all the way across town and into the building. But it just really felt like an unnecessary, like an unrealistic situation when all he had to do was find her and complete his mission. But anyway, overall, this does a great job. There's excellent dialogue. The acting is great. And I really enjoyed how you keep building that tension. And for the most part, that works really well. There's a lot of buildup. And then finally that release where there is that self-actualization like we talked about from the Jamie Foxx character. So I'm going to go pretty high on this, maybe like a 7.9. So just a little bit below these guys. Apparently, I'm an asshole. So sorry.
You watched it. You watched it, but you're introducing a bunch of criticisms I'd love to respond to. We got to wrap it up.
Well, we do have a segment called Kathleen Turner Overdrive, which is available for our Patreon supporters. And so we can dig into those things on that. And if you, our audience, want to hear that stuff, you can support us on Patreon at the $5 a month or more level. You can find that at lastnighters.com/Patreon. This episode, you can find the show notes and more at lastnighters.com/56. You can also find the episode on thelaunchpadmedia.com. And Robert, what did we land on for the next show?
Is this a quiz? Am I going to fail? We were talking about a couple different things.
Yeah, so it's fish in a barrel. Just pick one and we'll do that.
I think it's about time. It's about time we went into space and fought some bugs. That's my feeling.
All right, we're gonna do our part, and we're gonna go Starship Troopers next week.
That's what I'm feeling.
All right, you guys want me to do Starship Troopers with you? Because
you got some ideas on Starship Troopers?
I'll go right to 3 beers, and I'll be full fash for the entire thing. If you want me to apologize for fascism. Oh yeah.
All right. Well, we could potentially do a back-to-back if we can fit it in the schedule. So we'll be back next week with the Starship Troopers. So thank you guys for joining us, and good night from last night.